We'll delve again into the Precinct Strategy and break down why it's more important now than ever to get involved with Dan Schultz on this episode of United Patriots Uprising with Gary Binford. I'm your host, Gary Binford. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Hope you subscribe to it, leave a rating and a review. The video version you can find at YouTube, Rumble, and Conservative Television of America. Same thing. Hope you subscribe. Click that notification button. Click on that so whenever a podcast airs, you will receive it. And please make sure to tell your friends about the show. This show is not going to go anywhere the way I planned, folks. I really thought that Dan Schultz was going to have some great information about how we're getting the machines cleaned out and how people are becoming precinct chair people and how we're getting ready to steamroll these communist leftists in the 2024 elections. But it's not what Dan had to say. So I'm going to do something I've never done before on this podcast. I'm going to ask you to please share this with your friends because we need a wake-up call, America. I thought we were getting it, but Dan doesn't think so. And what you're about to hear, I hope it shakes you up as much as it shook me up, because this is some terrifying stuff you're about to hear about how this election will go down in 2024 if we don't get involved and get more Republicans in as precinct chair people. So are you ready? Let's get into it. My guest is an American first, a conservative second, and a Republican precinct committee man by necessity. He was here 2 years ago to talk about the precinct strategy and why it was so important that we as Americans embrace it. He's back again to give us an update. I welcome back to the show, Dan Schultz of the Precinct Strategy. Dan, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, Gary. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, and I hope you're doing fine. Now, 2 years ago when you came on, you explained why the precinct strategy was so important. You explained what it is, which you'll do again, and you explained why it was so important, why it would help take MAGA to new limits, and why it was so important for those midterm elections. Where do we stand now?
Well, we haven't made very much progress. We made a little bit of progress in some places, but the bottom line is this. There's 400,000 or so precinct committeeman positions that are volunteer positions that have voting rights in the apparatus in the Republican Party. There's about 400,000 of them. 2 years ago, about 200,000 or more were vacant. Verifiable. Since that time, about 200,000 still are vacant, which means that going into the most important election in our lifetime, like we always do, we're going in with a party that's at half strength. So if you want to have warm bodies, making telephone calls, dropping literature off at doors, steps of voters who need to be reminded to go vote, we only have half the people that we could have. And also with respect to the makeup of the RNC, it's the precinct committeemen and only the precinct committeemen who elect RNC members. So we've made a little bit of progress because in some states, there's now a majority of America Firsters in the precinct committeeman ranks, but not a super strong majority. We need a super strong majority, and we would have it if we could fill up the 200,000 vacant precinct committeeman slots with volunteer America Firsters who support Donald Trump. In other words, Trumplify the party apparatus so that when it comes time to elect the state chairs who serve on the RNC and the national committeemen and the national committee women, that's happening right now at the state presidential nominating conventions by state convention delegates. They're the people who elect the national committeemen and the national committee woman, who elects the delegates, precinct committeemen by and large. Some states, voters also have a hand in it, but that's rare. In most states, only precinct committeemen can vote for who becomes the state chairman, the national committeeman, the national committee woman. So if you want to Trumplify the RNC, there's only one way to do it. It's through the Precinct Committeemen strategy. So we've made a little bit of progress. We're getting a few more America Firsters onto the RNC, but by and large, still, it's anti-Trump, it's globalist, and it's not working for our best interests, our country's best interests. They're sellouts to the globalists. And we can change that. We, the people, have the power, which is what I learned way back in 1968 and 1969 in civics. And it's right in the Constitution, every 2 years, we, the people, can completely remake the House of Representatives at the federal level. But what happens? 95% plus of those incumbent rhinos win their primary, because the average turnout in a primary is between 20 and 30% in a Republican primary. Why is that? Because not enough of us are getting out the vote for the better candidates challenging the incumbents. That's what the precinct strategy is all about. It's basic American civics in action. And it's in my book. It's at my website, precinctstrategy.com. I do a daily podcast now. I try to make them short and educational. But we're not making much progress, and I'm not optimistic about the future.
Dan, you just blew me away. I did not expect this because I had you on 2 years ago and I thought it was going to catch fire. Steve Stern was on that show with you. Steve was my guest 2 weeks ago, and he's been working with people all around the country, and just like you, trying to get the word around about how you've got to get involved to stop the steal again. I really thought you were going to have a much better glowing report. So before I ask you what we can do to try and stem this tide at this late time, what went wrong here? I thought after everything these people have seen for the last 2 years, and when I say the people, I'm talking about the Republican electorate of America, that they would say, oh, hell no, we're not going communist, not in my lifetime, not on my watch. What has gone wrong?
Talk is cheap. Summer soldiers and sunshine patriots were talked about by Thomas Paine. It's real easy to say, well, look what I'm doing. I'm going to organize like a guy did in Detroit. He contacted me. A boat parade in Detroit when Trump was in Detroit recently for that Turning Point thing. That boat parade isn't going to do a damn thing to change voter turnout. It isn't going to do a damn thing to change the RNC or the Michigan Republican Party. The Michigan Republican Party is at 2/3 vacant. Only about a third of their precinct committeeman slots are filled. In Maricopa County, over 50% are going to be vacant after the July 30 primary. In Texas, only 44% of the slots got filled in the Texas caucus and primary system that they have. We're going into the upcoming election again with, that's the reason I wrote my book, How to Get into the Real Ball Game of Politics, Where You Live to Help President Trump Make America Great Again. The whole premise of this book is he was going to lose in 2020 because he wasn't recruiting precinct committeemen. And I was telling him in the book, recruit precinct committeemen, change the party, have the party behind you instead of, and not stabbing you in the back, but have it, helping you instead of hindering you, because they were sabotaging him in 2016 and they were sabotaging him in 2020. I saw it with my own eyes. They're doing it again. As far as I can tell, Trump Force 47 is just a typical RNC head fake, I call it. Every 4 years, we're going to hire all these people and they're going to be field coordinators and they're going to help get out the vote. And there's not one word on TrumpForce47.com about becoming a precinct committeeman and getting all those tens of thousands. There's 200,000 vacancies. And recruiting those people to become precinct committeemen. Why is that? They don't want us. The establishment doesn't want us. So we've got to do it ourselves, and that's what I do. My number one focus is, Kaylee Barber had this saying, the main thing is to keep making the main thing the main thing. What's the main thing? We have a party that's at half strength and ideologically split, and it could be changed overnight in 2 months, because in a lot of places, the committees, the local committees that will appoint you to vacancies, they meet every 2 months. In some cases, they meet every month. So in 2 months, we could have a line out the door. I've got a graphic that depicts that. A line out the door of America Firsters, Trump supporters. There's 74 million of us who voted for Trump. 200,000, if you do the math, is 0.3% of 74 million. I didn't say 3% of 74 million. I didn't say 1%. I said 0.3%. And we can't even get these summer soldiers and sunshine patriots who talk a lot and buy Trump stuff and go to the rallies and camp out so they can be on stage and all that stuff. None of that matters. We've got to get organized and united politically for real political action where we live in the best way possible. My dad used to always tell me if you're going to do something, do it in the best way possible. The best way to help Donald Trump, bar none, is to become a precinct committeeman. And I've been messaging that as best I can to anybody and everybody who's a Trump supporter. And most people go, yeah, that sounds great. I hope somebody does that. And that's why we're where we are now. And I'm not optimistic about outcome.
All right, Dan, this is so distressing. And would you say part of the problem is activism is in the blood of liberals? Activism is in the blood of leftists. They'll give up money, they'll give up pleasure, they'll give up almost anything for a cause, where Republicans tend to be responsible, families, children, and they haven't done this in 75 years. So it's always, let somebody else do it. Where I saw when Barack Obama was running, how they went and just did the Saul Alinsky tactics from Rules from Radicals, and they just got everybody. They were standing out in front of liquor stores, fish places in the black communities, the churches, the supermarkets, and they just got people on the grassroots, all riled up and fired up and got them involved. It just is. I agree with you for whatever reason, and I just think it's a DNA thing that we're just, a lot of our people aren't activists, and this is just so foreign to them. It's too much of a burden. Is that right?
Yeah, that is part of it. I call it CPPPDS. It's what conservatives suffer from. It's a malady. Conservative political party participation deficit syndrome. They like to talk about politics, but they don't do politics. Doing politics is going to that one meeting a month, like maybe on a Thursday night when you could be watching football, but instead you put your rear end in a folding chair for 2 hours at a boring meeting. They're usually pretty boring, but not always, because the candidates come to the local committee meetings. You learn about how to get out the vote at the local committee meetings. You learn a little bit about how Robert's Rules of Order work, which they don't teach in public school anymore. You learn how, I'll be able to actually run for state committeeman and then vote for who the party chair, the state party chair is. That's real political power. But nobody wants to make that sacrifice. They think that, I can do more, like tweeting all day. No, you can't. We're not going to win the election through Twitter. We're going to win the election. Most candidates even don't get this. And apparently Donald Trump really doesn't understand this. Because I've talked to a lot of candidates over the years. Some I could name drop here, but I'm not going to. And I'll always ask them this. What's the single most, because you always got to win the primary first. What's the single most important thing that you have to have compared to the other candidates to win your primary? And they'll look off into space and they'll say, money. I'll say, no, that's not it. I need to have better and the best political consultants. I go, no, that's not it. So I won't make you guess anymore. I'll just tell you. What you have to have at 7 p.m. when the polls close, you have to have more votes than the other candidates. And then there's always nervous laughter and yeah, I guess so. No, I say, don't guess so. Work backwards from that premise and goal. How are you going to get enough people to vote? And I'll tell you how to do it. And I've made proposals to candidates. Nobody would hire me, but one guy in 2016, I did it for him for free because he was a Air Force Academy grad. I'm a West Pointer. He was 10 years younger than me. He had run once before. We wanted to take out a really awful incumbent rhino in a state Senate race. And we did, using the Precinct Committeemen strategy. And we won in a landslide. And the way we did it is we got all of our volunteers, some of whom were Precinct Committeemen, most of whom were. And we had all of the other people that he knew who would help the Precinct Committeemen. And we targeted the voters who don't normally vote in the primary. We gave them a reason to go vote. We called them. We sent them a flyer. Anyways, we won in a landslide, and the guy didn't even see us coming. And it wasn't his signs that won it. And he when I walked into his house that night, he said, "Here's the guy who won this for us. It's Dan Schultz." Yay. Because we went to the voters who don't normally vote. The average turnout in a Republican primary is between 20 and 30%. In midterm House and Senate races, it's 20%. That's verified. 80% don't vote. But if you can go to those voters and give them a reason to go vote, they'll vote. And that's what we did. And that's how you win. But most candidates don't get this. And apparently Donald Trump doesn't think precinct committeemen are all that important, even though he endorsed my precinct strategy with the help of Steve Bannon and others. You know, it's on my website, the endorsement. He endorsed it, but that was 2 years ago. But have you ever, if you can find a video clip of him standing in front of an audience, or any other Republican for that matter, and saying to the conservatives in the audience, if you really want to help me become a precinct committeeman, go to precinctstrategy.com. Learn how to do it. That's the best way to help yourself and help me get elected. Become a precinct committeeman. Trump doesn't say that ever. I wish he would.
I do, and I know Steve Stern wishes he would too. It's tough. You know, Dan, it just seems like Republicans know how to win debates in the arena of ideas, but Democrats know how to win elections.
Yeah, it's two totally different things. And David Schweikert used to be my congressman, and I know him fairly well. And I used to see him at the Republican gatherings. I'd be there recruiting precinct committeemen. He'd be there saying, "Please vote for me," okay, at like a Tea Party event or something. And that we were at an Arizona Republican Assembly event, and he was speaking, and he said, "What does this organization want to do? It seems like all you want to do is get together and talk about issues." And he said, "Listen, I know people who have gone," and I've heard him say this at two different gatherings. The other time it was at a Federalist Society luncheon. And he said the difference between Republicans and Democrats is because he says, I have firsthand knowledge of this through surrogates of mine who have gone to the Democrat committee meetings, the monthly meetings. What do they talk about? Numbers. How many more how many more Democrats did we get on the voter rolls this past month? How many more precinct committeemen did we recruit? How many other Democrat organizations like public unions, how did we do outreach to? They talk about winning elections. What do Republicans talk about? Oh, we have such good ideas for the country. Our ideas are so much better than the Democrats. And then they go home and they pat themselves on the back. We've got better ideas. Big deal. It doesn't turn into votes. Getting votes, getting people to the polls takes grunt work because most Americans, unfortunately, 60%, only about 60% vote in a general election, even presidential elections. But in my precinct in 2020, we got over 90%, only 9% of Republicans in my precinct did not vote in the general election, the presidential general election in 2020. The average in Arizona, remember 2020 was the most important election in our lifetime. The average was 72% of Republicans. And the average of all eligible voters was about 68%. But we got over 90% in my precinct. So did 3 other precincts out of 42 in my legislative district using the Precinct Committeemen strategy. And I have a video on my website at precinctstrategy.com on the how-to videos page that explains how easy it is using the software that they give you. That's what we have to do, but nobody wants to.
Yes. Well, Dan, you have everybody all fired up, at least I hope, and you have everybody saying, okay, what must we do? Please explain to them what the precinct strategy is. And by the way, you came from counterintelligence in the Army, and then you're a trial lawyer. How did you even get involved in this?
I always knew what it was because I learned it in 7th grade civics. And then I moved to Arizona from Los Angeles, and I had helped out on campaigns when I lived in California, and I was heavily into the Second Amendment because of the assault weapons ban. But when I got to Arizona, the illegal immigration was just out of control in the Phoenix area where I was. So I went to somebody was putting together a border militia. So I thought I'll go to the border militia meeting, and one of the guys was Don Goldwater was his name. He's a Goldwater descendant. Barry was his uncle or great uncle. Anyways, I'm there, and some guy stands up, a nice young man, a great big guy. I've never seen him since, and he had on a black suit and a black tie and a white shirt. And he says, well, there's another thing that we all could do, everybody in this room, because Janet Napolitano was our governor at that time, and she was not sending the National Guard down to the border. She wouldn't do it. He said, what we could do is we could all become precinct committeemen in the Republican Party. There's plenty of vacancies. Well, ding, 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 ding. I knew exactly what he was talking about. So I walked up to him and I said, what's the first thing I need to do in order to find my local committee? He said, call the GOP headquarters. I said, okay. So I did. And I called and I called and I called and I called. Finally, I got in my car and I drove to the headquarters and walked in and said, hey, I live in Tempe. What's my legislative district? Where's my committee meet? And I went to my first meeting. Now, this was in 2007. I went to my first meeting, and I'm telling you what you have to do. You have to find your local committee, and at precinctstrategy.com, I have step-by-step directions on how to do that, and what to say when you get there, and what to ask for when you get there. You go there, you don't wear your Trump gear. You walk in and you say, I'm a good Republican. I always vote. I want to help elect more Republicans. Sorry, I got a freight train going through my hometown here. And
just say, as long as it's not going through your living room.
Yeah, it's close. Anyways, you tell them, I want to help. And then you ask, how do I become a voting member of this committee? They may not want you. And you ask for the bylaws, and you ask for a precinct committeeman handbook if there is one. And then you start learning, and then you start meeting people, okay? Now, I did it a little bit different. When I went to my first meeting, there was only about 25 people there. And I said, when they asked for the new people to raise their hand, so I did, and then they asked you to say a few words about yourself, and I did, and I said this. Now, John McCain was running for the presidency, and I said, I don't like John McCain. I don't like him at all. If you look up Attila the Hun in the dictionary, you're going to see my picture. I'm very right-wing. I'm a Fred Thompson supporter. But if John McCain wins, I will do everything I can to help him get elected because I'm conservative in the primary and Republican in the general. Okay? But then I said, where is everybody? And the current chair said, what do you mean? I go, well, there's only about 25 people here and 5 of us are new. Where is everybody? Well, this is about what we get at our meetings. I go, well, how many precinct committeemen are there in this committee? Well, there's about 40. And I said, well, how many slots are there? About 160. So we were at 25% strength going into John McCain's presidential election in Arizona. And that's the way it was all across Arizona at that time. Then we lost. So then in 2009 at the first meeting, I stood up after they said, well, we'll see you in 2 months. I said, what do you mean in 2 months? Well, in off election years, we only meet every other month. I said, we just elected a communist. We should be meeting every 2 weeks. I make a motion that we at least meet once a month. The motion was seconded, voted on, and carried. So we went back to monthly meetings. So that hasn't changed anywhere. All across the state now, we always meet monthly, as far as I know, because it's so critical. But still, how well did we do in recruiting precinct committeemen in Maricopa County, where I used to live? Not very well. We're only going to have 49.8% of the slots that could have been filled. That means instead of having, if they're all filled in Arizona, 1 out of 125 Republicans are in the party apparatus doing something as precinct committeemen. When you're at half strength, that means only 1 out of about 250 Republicans are doing something concrete to help change the party from within and elect better Republicans. And that's why we're probably going to lose the Republic in 2024, because we have failed to fill all these vacancies.
Oh gosh, this is so disheartening. This is why I'm just praying and counting on God, a hammer to try and change this thing, because I can't believe this, Dan. After talking to you 2 years ago, I really thought, and I keep talking to Steve, Stern is always emailing me every other day, and I just thought people were grabbing onto this and understanding if we don't win this election, we could lose the country forever. I can't believe this is happening this way.
Well, almost everywhere we're still going to be using Dominion machines. And why is that? There's only one group of people who can stop that. Only one. State legislators. They have plenary power from the Constitution to, for example, do this with respect to just the federal elections. They could say to their Secretary of State, if that's who runs the election apparatus in the state, they could say, you can't use Dominion machines for the federal elections. It has to be a hand count, paper ballots, one-day election. You can't use mail-in ballots either, only for verifiable military people and verifiable invalids. And they can change that, how it's done, the times, the places, and the manner, without it being passed into law by the governor, because they have plenary authority. That's direct from the Constitution to do that. Why haven't they done it? Well, they look from their perch inside the state. In Arizona, for example, we have a Republican majority in both chambers. Pennsylvania, Republican majorities in both chambers. Georgia, same thing. I don't think Michigan does anymore, but Wisconsin does. Wisconsin has a Democrat governor, but Republican. But they're Republicans. Why don't they do this? Well, it's simple. They're not afraid of losing their next primary election, whatever that might be, because they look across their state, like Arizona, like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, like Georgia. They look across their state, like Pennsylvania. I just did a podcast Sunday with Steve Carr. He's in York County, Pennsylvania. I asked him, how many slots do you have and how many are filled? Well, we have 137 precinct committeemen now after the primary, but we have 319 slots. So they're at about 1/3 strength. There you go. And the state legislators know this, and they know, okay, well, I'm safe. Why should I stick my neck out? The conservatives in this state don't seem to want to become precinct committeemen even. Why should I stick my neck out and upset the apple cart? Why don't I just go along and get along? Nobody seems to care. And they'll start caring, because if we fill up all the vacant precinct committeeman slots, because then they'll start caring about whether or not they're going to lose their next election, their primary. Right. You have to win the primary. That's why nothing is changing. It's the fundamental problem. See, what's going on in the country, that's not the disease. Those are symptoms of the disease. The disease is we the people. We the people, like I said, in 2020 in Arizona, on average in a precinct, only 72% of Republicans thought it was worth their while to go vote. 28% didn't. I do everything in my power to make sure I vote, because people gave their lives so that I could vote. And most Americans don't think like that anymore, apparently. That was drilled into us when I was in public school. Civic duty, civic responsibility. See, there are words like this that conservatives don't have in their vocabulary anymore. I talked about that a few podcasts ago about we need new words. Conservatives don't use words like victory, strategy, organizing, uniting. GOTV, which is not a new channel on cable. It's get out the vote. We don't talk about that sort of stuff. We've got to start talking about it. And the politicians they don't talk about it because they want everything to go be just the way it is. They want to win their next primary.
Good enough, Dan, right? Just the way it is isn't good enough. And along those lines, tell them about your book.
Right. Sure. My book is short. It's to the point. This is what it looks like. It's big print, real big print. It's only got 2 graphics in it. I made it as short as possible and as inexpensive as possible, but I think it's $9.99 for the paperback.
Well, tell them the name.
Well, it's how to get into the real ball game of politics, where you live, to help President Donald J. Trump make America great again. But you don't have to remember that. Just go to precinctstrategy.com, click on Dan's book. It'll take you to Amazon. You can order the paperback. You can order a digital version for $2.99, and now there's an Audible version for $3.99. It's a short read. I get very good reviews because most people will email me about it when they do, and they'll say, I went to your website, and I liked your website and everything, but it wasn't until I got the book and read it. That's what really put me over the edge, and that's what got me into action. Like, I like to say, and Steve Stern likes to say, action, action, action. We've got to take action. So it's not complicated. This is Phyllis Schlafly's flyer from long ago. The most important office in the world is not the President of the United States. And cut to the chase, what is it? It's precinct committeemen. See, if there are no precinct committeemen in the Republican Party, there's no party. Precinct committeemen are the party. And it's all explained at precinctstrategy.com. It's all explained in my book. It's all explained in my podcast. And you can get everything that you need at my site. But we have a communications and collaboration platform that Robert Beadle's built for us. We have 16,530 plus people on it already. I wanted to get 300,000 by the end of last year. Well, that didn't happen. Why? Well, people just don't want to communicate and collaborate about politics. They just want to type on Twitter all day, or thinking that's going to change something. Did you hear about this? Oh, look at that. Hey, retweet this, as if that's going to change anything. It isn't. We've got to get organized and united politically where we live in the best way possible. Politically, I should get engaged politically. What kind of an organization should that be? Maybe a political organization. What's the best kind of political organization? Maybe a political party and a local committee. See, most people, when you say I'm a committeeman, they don't know what that means. They don't even know there are local committees. They think of when they think of GOP.com and the RNC and the RNC's website, they think that's the Republican Party. I keep telling everybody the Republican Party is not a building and it's not a pile of money. It's people. And I have a graphic where I show Charlton Heston in Soylent Green looking up and screaming, the Republican Party is people. It's people. And it is. It's people. It's just a network of people. Local, and start where you live. You have to start where you live. Find your local committee, go to the meeting, volunteer, and then recruit everybody else who is your friend, your conservative friend, no matter where they live. If they live somewhere else in the country, get them to go and become a precinct committeeman. We only need 200,000 people to save the day. but we don't have them yet. So we're going in with the status quo into 2024. We're going to be using machines again. We're not going to have enough people. We never have enough poll workers. We never have enough poll watchers. We never have enough precinct committeemen. And so we're probably going to lose because it'll be stolen right in front of our eyes. And then who's going to do anything about it? Nobody.
Dan,
I mean, we could. There are other things we could be doing, but we're not doing them.
Yeah. Dan, I'm a very positive person. It's very hard to depress me, but you've managed to do it. I did not expect this. No, I'm glad. Hopefully it'll reach some other people and they'll feel how I feel right now. So my final question to you, is there still time for people to get involved? And if so, make a passionate plea along this line. Like, if we don't get this done, what are we looking at after November 5th?
I'll tell you, I say this usually, I'm glad you asked that, because at the end of my podcast, I usually say the following. Can I guarantee you that if we got 200,000 America Firsters out of that 74 million, 0.3% to become precinct committeemen, that magically we're going to save the Republic? Because we've taken over the Republican Party. We have enough warm bodies to boost turnout. But is that going to save the day? I can't guarantee that, because all sorts of other bad things undoubtedly are going to be happening. They're all on the horizon, and I think they're going to be happening. But at least we'll have a shot. The flip side of that coin's easy. What happens if we don't fill up all the vacancies, which we haven't done? Well, that's easy. We're going to lose the Republic. And if you like socialism, you're going to like it even better after 2024, because that's where we're headed. The Uniparty is going to continue to launder money in the Ukraine. They're going to continue to let illegals come in. They're not going to deport anybody. They're going to let them all vote, look the other way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know all the bad things that are happening in the country. That's going to continue, and it's going to get worse. It's going to snowball. And before you know it, your country, as you know it, it will be gone. That's what's going to happen. But it could be stopped.
Yeah.
If
tell them how. Tell them what we must do. Make a passionate plea. What they must do right here, right now.
You need to go to precinctstrategy.com, read everything on that main page, and eventually you're going to get to 3 steps. How to find your local committee, what to say when you go to the first meeting, and what not to do. Don't wear your Trump stuff, because they may be anti-Trump, the officers, and they may tell you, we're not going to appoint you because you're pro-Trump. Just go in and say, I'm a good Republican. I want to help elect more Republicans. I vote all the time. I want to volunteer. I want to become a voting member of this committee as soon as possible. And if I can't, I'll help. I'll be a helper. I'll volunteer and help. And then you ask for a copy of the bylaws so you can familiarize yourself with how the party works. And if they have a precinct committeeman handbook, do that. At precinctstrategy.com, I've got something for every state, at least something that will help you get started. Some information. Some of the websites I link to are very good. They've got great precinct committeeman handbooks, like azgop.com. I don't link to it, but that's the Arizona Republican State Committee website. It's got a downloadable precinct committeeman handbook. So if you're in Arizona, you can read that handbook. It's a good handbook. And then know the lingo when you go to the meeting. If you're uncomfortable talking about politics because you don't know, like precinct committeeman is a foreign word for most people. In Texas, it's called precinct chair. In Washington, it's precinct committee officer. In Oregon, it's precinct committee person. In some states, it's like Michigan, it's precinct delegate. And I know people who've gone to meetings and they've done what I've told them to do, but they didn't do any homework. So they said, I want to be a precinct committeeman. This happened in Michigan. I want to be a precinct committeeman. And the rhino running the meeting said, well, we don't have precinct committeemen here. He didn't go on to say, we call them precinct delegates. Mm-hmm. He made the person seem foolish. And then the guy left and emailed me, hey, they told me they don't have precinct committeemen in Michigan. I said, they don't. They're called precinct delegates. You should have done some homework. It would have helped to do a little bit of homework before you go. So are we still America? Do we still have enough Americans? I mean, real Americans who will do something? I'm not so sure. The numbers point to we don't know how to do politics, and we're not doing politics. So we're probably going to lose the Republic in 2024. So I may write a new book, How to Survive the Coming Times Under Socialism, instead of a follow-on to my Precinct Committeemen handbook.
Well, Dan, hopefully if we can get to enough people, maybe it'll shake them up and get them to get out and get involved and do something, because it's on us. There's nobody else that can do this. There's not going to be anybody that's going to come to our aid or come to our rescue, and we certainly can't count on the Republican establishment and rhinos to help us. This is it. Independents, they can't help us. People, we've got to do this, and people like Dan Schultz and Steve Stern are very courageous and very non-wavering their support to try and save this country, and we need to do likewise. Dan, I really appreciate you coming on, and keep doing what you're doing. The battle's not lost yet. We have to keep fighting and fighting and fighting, and hopefully we still have time for the Precinct Strategy to take hold and help save this union. So thanks for coming on, and God bless you and your family.
You bet. Thanks, Gary. Bye-bye.
All right, there you have it, Dan Schultz. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom, everybody. We still have time to get this under control, and we better do it. If not, we will pay a very, very stiff price. I want to thank Dan Schultz for coming back and giving us a wake-up call, and a much-needed wake-up call, one that I didn't even realize we needed, because I thought we were doing much better in regard to getting precinct chair people than we are. I thought 2 years ago, when he made his passionate plea on this show, I thought the ball was rolling and we were getting more precinct people in as chair people, and that we understood that it's now or never in this election for America. Well, according to Dan, it's not going anywhere near as well as planned. So Dan, thank you for coming back and issuing a dire warning that we better get this together while we still have time to do so. So keep up the good fight, and don't let them grind you down. This podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcast. Hope you subscribe to it, leave a rating and a review, and be sure to tell your friends about the show. The video version, you can find it at YouTube, Rumble, and Conservative Television of America. Same thing. Please click that notification button, subscribe, so every Tuesday when a new podcast comes out, you'll receive it. There's also an audio archive version with more than 175 high-profile guests who have appeared on this podcast, including Dan. That's where you'll find Dan from his audio podcast a couple of years ago. And there's so many people there that what they had to say then is just as valid today. Here are some that you would find there: Will Witt, Naomi Wolf, Christina Bobb and Ben Carson, Monica Crowley, Vince Everett Ellison, Carrie Lake, Claire Lopez, Trevor Loudon, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, Rebecca Friedrichs, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Tom Holman, Judge Janine Pirro, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer, Kevin Sorbo, Carol Swain, Donna Fiducia and Don Newen, and Steve Stern, just to name a few. So hope you'll check that out. Well, that's it for now, everyone. This is your host, Gary Binford, saying until the next time, God bless you, God bless your families, and boy, does God really, really need to bless America.